There's a season of life we all go through, when your friends start getting married, buying their first homes, landing promotions, and starting families. It's a stage of life that's full of celebrations and milestones and forward motion. It was during this stage of my life, as everyone around me was accelerating, that I felt like I was caught in a state of inertia. I was in a health crisis. I was watching the world move around me while I stayed still. It was during my mid-20s, after countless unexplained visits to the emergency room, endless days suffering from paralyzing pain and fatigue and weakness that just didn't make sense for a fit 25-year-old with no pre-existing health conditions or family history of illness, when I finally received a diagnosis. It was after a particularly unpleasant test. I was resting in the recovery room when the gastroenterologist met me at the side of my bed. She said, "I'm afraid what we observed during the test is consistent with Crohn's disease." Those words changed everything. In short, Crohn's disease is a chronic autoimmune disease for which there is no cure. The immune system mistakenly attacks the body's own tissues, and specifically those in the gastrointestinal tract. This information was so overwhelming, but at least I had some information. I was a dutiful and compliant patient. Immunosuppressants, biologics, and steroids all became part of the strange and foreign new language of IBD, inflammatory bowel disease. Can we all agree that that name is just terrible? Treatment after treatment failed. I worked with doctors and naturopaths and alternative healers. I tried acupuncture and visualization therapy. I changed my diet and my lifestyle. Things I used to love to do, like going on runs with my husband, who was my fiance at the time, were out of the question. Things like travel and work events and bachelorette parties, keep in mind I was in my 20s, would wipe me out for days. I was sinking. Despite the miserable state of my health, I didn't look sick. Maybe a little bit tired or pale, but not sick in a way that was an outward signal to others. I'll return to this point a little bit later. Life marched on. This is me on my wedding day. This was one of those impossibly perfect days where your heart is just so full that your face hurts from smiling. It was amazing. However, after the wedding, the adrenaline rush crashed and things took a turn for the worse. I had a great new job at a university business school, but the schedule was grueling and full of travel and stress. My condition worsened. Okay, a quick pivot. I'd like to share the definition of a semicolon. A semicolon is a punctuation mark indicative of a pause, typically between two main clauses and more pronounced than that of a comma. The humble semicolon has a whole new meaning for me. 6 years of failed treatments later, I was given one option: surgery. A right hemicolectomy, to be precise. In other words, half of my colon would be removed, leaving me with a semicolon. A very permanent decision. Surgery was unpleasant, to put it mildly, and emotional, and it required a long road to recovery. But, oh, I forgot, half a colon, still rolling. It helps to laugh. But let's not forget the definition of a semicolon. It is indicative of a pause, typically between two main clauses. I'd like to share just a tiny little glimpse of what has come after the pause. September marked 10 years since that surgery. I've had a decade of good health, not perfect, but good. And for anyone in here who's been really sick, you know there are no words to describe the feeling of gratitude that you have for that. Will the Crohn's come back? The doctors tell me yes, and I will cross that bridge when I must. Crohn's disease is often characterized as an invisible illness. An invisible illness is a health condition with symptoms that are not outwardly visible, making it difficult for people to recognize or understand what's going on. These illnesses can significantly impact one's daily life, even though the person may appear well on the outside. I mentioned earlier that despite my very real health struggle, I didn't look sick, so it was hard for my friends to understand when I had to cancel the trip or why I couldn't attend their event. Previous colleagues of mine probably thought it was weird seeing me slumped over my desk sipping on a Gatorade. They didn't know that during a bad flare, I would be restricted to a liquid diet for days at a time. I can't even look at Gatorade anymore. Previous bosses of mine might have questioned my commitment when I had to take another sick day. I bring this up seeing as the theme for this year's TED Talk is Illuminating Shadows. Talking about this experience is very, very personal and vulnerable for me, but fear and shame thrive in the shadows, settling in deeper the longer they stay hidden. Illnesses like Crohn's and so many others operate in a hidden world where well-meaning family and colleagues may not understand the intensity of the experience. Because we look fine, it can be easy to dismiss or overlook what's happening beneath the surface. Let's be intentional about the light we bring. If you know someone who's suffering from an invisible illness, there are many ways that you can offer your support. Listen and don't judge. Understand that chronic illness seldom have quick fixes, so patience is important. There are good days and bad. It's all very unpredictable. Practical help is great, and so is just showing up. I will forever be grateful to the dear friend who scooped me up off the floor of my apartment, got me in her car, and drove me to the emergency room. But she had the good sense to grab a pair of warm socks because she knew I would be there for hours, and ERs can feel very cold. By making space for these experiences to be heard and understood, we take a small step toward a more empathetic world where no one has to suffer in the shadows. So I challenge you, let's make space for vulnerability and for kindness and for an understanding that even what we can't see deserves our care. Thank you.